project we are very proud of at Hebrew University is that every year we identify a number of the gifted kids in high schools. These are 15, 16-year-old gifted children in the high schools in Jerusalem. And what we do is we take these kids and we bring them to the university, and we match every kid with a Hebrew University professor in the area where that kid is, starting to develop a career. So 2 weeks ago, at the university, we had our executive council, executive meeting. And I decided to show the older generation, my generation, what these kids are all about. And we brought a 16-year-old girl, to present her work, her scientific work. And she is working with the Hebrew University professor. She is interested in microbiology. And she is investigating anthrax. Everybody knows what anthrax is. And she is developing in the laboratory of this professor those viruses that can fight anthrax. And she has already 2 viruses named after her. I mean, the Sarid Alpha 300 and the Sarid Alpha 303, you can check later, you can Google it. I mean, these are 2 viruses that were found by a 16-year-old kid. I mean, and if this is not what the spirit of Hebrew University is, then I don't know what is. As Roberto said, I joined Hebrew University after 40 years of service to my country in the diplomatic world. I spent time in Washington. I was ambassador in the Netherlands, ambassador in Paris, director general of the foreign ministry. And after 40 years in government, when you rub shoulders every day with prime ministers and foreign ministers, call you in the middle of the night and this, you develop some kind of cynicism, because politics is quite cynical. And then, after 40 years, when I moved to Hebrew University, all of this cynicism was pushed aside. When you see these young researchers investigating or researching Alzheimer and Parkinson and heart diseases and everything, and you see these young kids, and you immediately put all the cynicism aside and you say, wow, maybe there is something about these crazy Jewish people. I mean, these are the scientists. So this is what Hebrew University is all about. I'll be very glad to speak at length about the university later, but my bosses here told me that I should speak about the Middle East today with all the changes. And I'll put it in a very brief way. In the short run, I think that we are doing very well. Strategically, in the short run, I think that Israel is better off this year than last year, and much better off compared to 2 years ago. However, when it comes to the long run, I have my question marks and I have my concerns. And let me explain. Short term, in the next 2 or 3 years, I think that Israel is in a very good strategic position, because when you look at the map of the Middle East and you look at all the meshugas that is happening around us, you see that Hezbollah to the north is very busy now fighting alongside Assad in massacring the poor Syrian people. So Hezbollah is on the one hand very busy in the war in Syria, and on the other hand still deterred as a result of the last Lebanese war, when Israel reacted very, very strongly. So they keep quiet for the short run. You move to the neighbor of Lebanon, you move to Syria. Syria does not really exist. For all practical purposes, the traditional Syria we used to know is now divided into 3 Syrias. One of the regime, that brutal regime that keeps massacring his own people. You have the opposition, and you have the terrorist organization. So I mean, they are very busy there. They don't pose a threat to us. By the way, speaking of Syria, our only interest in Syria is that, of course, of our security. I mean, we don't want to be drawn into the battlefield there. We don't want anybody to pull us into the mud of Syria, but we have our red lines. And our red lines are very clear. We will not let anything happening in Syria endanger our security, and we will not let the transfer of certain kind of weapons from the regime to the terrorist organizations. Now keep moving clockwise on this imaginary map that I'm talking about. You now move to ISIS, to the Islamic State, to Daesh. Again, you follow the news like me, and I think that the international coalition is finally getting some results in really containing the Daesh. I think that this incredible phenomenon of this extremist, I mean, massacring and killing their own people in such a brutality, I think that this is about to be solved. Because after all, what are we talking about? We're talking about a group of 35,000 to 40,000 people, I mean, rich with extreme resources, very sophisticated but very cruel. But the Middle East now understands that the immediate threat they pose is not to Europe and not to America and not to Israel. The immediate threat they pose is to the Muslim world itself. And now, because of the coalition and certain countries joining forces, I think that the impact of ISIS is contained. Now continue to move, I mean, on this map, look at Jordan, look at Saudi Arabia, look at Egypt. I mean, Egypt is the closest ally of Israel in that part of the world. I mean, we share the same strategic interest. I mean, the Sinai that separates Israel and Egypt is the ground where some of these terrorist organizations that threaten both Israel and Egypt reside. So we share the same concern. Jordan, I consider myself, from the whole, quite a long list of things that I was involved in, I'm especially proud of being one of the negotiators of the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan. And the fact is that these relations are very close. But listen even to Saudi Arabia. The kind of music you hear nowadays from Saudi Arabia as regards Israel is totally different. I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Israel was not to be even mentioned in Saudi Arabia. Today, when you listen to their public statements, I mean, it's a different world. So this is the map that surrounds Israel. You add to that the fact that Israel still enjoys a very, very strong economy, a resilient economy. And by the way, my university, your university, was in the news this last 3 weeks because of this huge deal of Mobileye being sold to Intel for a small amount of money, $15.3 billion. This is a number that I cannot even imagine. There are countries on this globe that don't have a national budget of $15.3 billion. Now, why is it Hebrew University? Because the guy behind Mobileye is a Hebrew University professor. He still teaches at our computer department. Professor Amnon Shashua, a nice guy of Iraqi origin, is a professor at the Hebrew University, and he made quite a fortune. I mean, I cannot even count that number, $15.3 billion. Now, I mean, how much is it in pesos? So the economy is very strong. So this is short term. But I said at the beginning that I'm more concerned about long term. And here are my concerns. My concerns have to do first with a player that was not mentioned yet, and this is Iran. Iran, for the time being, I mean, is to a certain degree constrained by the constraints put on it by the international community. But let us not kid ourselves. I mean, one does not need sophisticated intelligence to understand what Iran is after. I mean, all you have to do is read their newspapers and listen to their leaders, and they say day in, day out, that their goal is to exterminate the Jewish state. And if we learn something from our history, it is not to take lightly threats like this. Now, in addition to the nuclear thing, I mean, you follow the news, and you see the rapid development of their long-term missiles. I mean, they keep developing these missiles. Now, for 2,000, 3,000 kilometers, they don't need 3,000 kilometers to cover Tel Aviv or Jerusalem. Tel Aviv is only 1,000 kilometers from Tehran. 2,000 and 3,000 kilometers cover the entire European continent. So Iran is a major threat to, to be looked at very, very carefully and to follow very, very carefully, on the part of Israel. Number two, and this has to do, and how should I put it in a diplomatic way? And this has to do with changing perceptions in our part of the world as to the role of the superpowers. Russia, that was not there for many years, is, for the last several months or 2 years, is very, very active. Russia, after the Ukraine, is involved very much now in Syria. Involved to the point that the chief of staff of Israel and the chief of staff of Russia, have to be in contact just to make sure that our airplanes don't shoot by mistake a Russian airplane over Syria. So there is a growing involvement of Russia in our part of the world, and to a certain degree, now I'm not saying whether this is true or not, but there is this notion that maybe the other superpower, America, is withdrawing somewhat from that part of the world. This is something that should be of concern. And last but not least, and this is again something that we did not mention but merits a lot of mention, this is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I, for one, as an Israeli, as a father of 3 children that live there, I am quite concerned that, that there's really nothing happening, no engagement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. As someone who was involved in negotiating with the Palestinians, negotiating with the Jordanians, I learned a very important lesson, that for peace to happen, you need to engage, you need to talk, you need to sit together to the negotiating table. Peace is about compromise. Compromise is about giving up some of your dreams. And unfortunately, for the last 7 years, we do not see any of this happening. Now, I'm not going to blame this or that, but one thing is worth mentioning, and this is the reluctance of our partners, of our neighbors, to come to the negotiating table. Up to a certain point, we were negotiating with them. But then about 6.5, 7 years ago, the Palestinians refused to come to the negotiating table. Why? Because they were under the impression that somebody else will do the job for them. So they were hoping that maybe the European Union will put pressure on Israel. And then maybe the American administration will put pressure on Israel. And then when this failed, they started with the option of the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court. And this, in short, they tried everything other than the only thing that is needed, which is to sit down to the table. I'm not trying to belittle the gravity of the issues to be negotiated. But one thing I know for certain, we are there to stay, and they are there to stay. And, you know, we don't really have time to waste, because the more time elapses between this engagement, the less of a constituency there is for peace. And so these are the three things that are, you know, of concern to me: Iran, the international involvement in the region, and the lack of anything happening on the Israeli-Palestinian question.